Yeah? Oh, there we go. Feedback. All right. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 5 p.m. for the Engineering Committee meeting. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have approval of the agenda.
I motion to approve the agenda.
All right, I second. Number 2 item, public comment. Amy, do we have anybody online for public comment?
No, there is nobody.
And there's nobody here in the audience. So we'll move on to 3, approval of the minutes.
I motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second. Minutes approved. 4, review of the district's vehicle replacement plan.
Can we swap these items and do the number 5 in place of number 4? We'll swap in case I have to step out.
Yeah, whatever.
Okay.
That sounds good. All right, so we're going to swap 5 and 4. So it'll be the discussion review options for hexavalent chromium mitigation.
Thank you, Director Snyder. I believe it's page 6, I apologize, page 8 in our packets.
Sean, is your microphone on?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Fish, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, page 8 in our packets. This is our water operations hexavalent chromium mitigation options. The next page, this is just a message from the State Water Resource Control Board about the regulation taking effect. And just to touch on that it did take effect October 1st of 2024. Districts our size will have a 3-year compliance window. So we do have until October 1st of 2027 to mitigate the chromium in our district. What options do we have before us? Option 1 is drilling a new well and or wells. That would be the drilling of new production wells on the recently acquired property at Beakley and Begonia, well number 18, and potentially drilling a well at the district fill station, and that would be known as well 16. And just to revisit that, CEQA has been completed on that property. Another option staff looked at, or option 2, would be a pipeline down to the Meadowbrook Dairy. There is 4 existing wells down there, so the risk associated with drilling new wells is mitigated there. It is a known quality and known quantity of water. That would require roughly 5.8 miles of 12-inch ductile iron pipe. And then staff looked at a third option, which would be ion exchange treatment, the installation and operation of a strong-based and ion exchange treatment. What does that capital and annual O&M costs look like? So the first option, drilling that new well or wells. If we remember, for well 15, we installed 5,500 feet of 12-inch ductile to service recently drilled and online well 15. Using that known water quality and quantity, we hypothesized and found and have recently acquired a property at Beakley and Begonia and begun CEQA to drill what's become affectionately known as well number 18. This option, there is no rental equipment necessary. We'll have to install roughly about 600 foot of main line from the existing distribution system. We did test the hydraulic model because where this water would introduce into our distribution system will function much like existing well number 8. It would feed reservoirs 1A directly through the distribution system. Sheep Creek and Oliveira at the property the district already owns, where the fill station is located there at Sheep Creek and Oliveira, is the potential site for a secondary. CEQA is complete. We analyze Mojave's geotechnical data. We hypothesize you'll yield between 400 and 500 gallons there. And again, Mojave did geotechnical data along the aqueduct. They look at their data a little differently than we might look. Where percolates water will also extract water. So we just kind of use their data in reverse. On this option, well number 15 will serve as the template for the depth, construction, and materials. We do try and standardize as much as possible. Using that analog, the cost to drill the pilot hole, ream, and case is right about $1.1 million. Although, and there's a caveat to this that just took effect, and is going to impact all of us, even automobiles. Steel just got hit with a 20% tariff, and we're seeing those costs. Nobody wasted any time with increasing. In fact, we just purchased some steel yesterday. Prices are already reflecting that 20% increase. So with that being said, that 1.1 million gets us the hole in the ground, and then we can equip that hole for about $480,000, and then SCADA about another $50,000. And in our 10-year CIP, that does fall under the drilling. This item does fall into the 10-year CIP for the coming year to the tune of $2 million.
Quick question. On the
yes, sir.
480,000, that covers the pump, motor, MCC panel, building, chlorination equipment?
Roughly,
Everything? Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Except telemetry.
Yeah.
And again, we just extrapolated the data from well 15.
Sean, before we move on to number 2, I kind of want to, a question that I had, which Sean explained to me. So we need to have almost the equivalent of 2 wells to take care of our chromium 6 issue. What the plan has been, we're looking at all of the options, is to drill a new well, and then we had money budgeted for fixing well 14 and well 12, doing some zone testing and possibly packing. Are those the correct wells, Sean?
That is correct. So in our 10-year CIP, $450,000 was allocated for profiling and equipping well 14, and then an additional $150,000 we've already profiled. Well 12 would be for a pneumatic packer and to downsize the pump, unfortunately. Well 12 is a known. We know we would give up roughly 500 gallons.
Right.
Well 14, while it resides in Antelope Valley, the replacement water cost today is $1,190 per acre foot. That is really the deterrent to utilizing that well. So even if we were to invest in profiling it, the cost to utilize it is non-beneficial. And I would like to reiterate the risk while drilling. Again, we can use well 15 as the analog all we want. I've seen on the same property, one well yield 200 gallons a minute and one yield 6,000 gallons a minute. Anything is possible. Even well 15's water comes out, is the warmest in the district, just the formation that we happen to hit. I hope, and we can hypothesize all we want, but until the actual bit's in the ground and the pump's running, there's always a risk associated with drilling. And that kind of segues us into number 2.
Quick question
Yes, sir.
on number 1. So on the number 1 option, it's adding additional wells and then probably blending that together as it comes into the system with
No.
existing sources, right?
No blending. So what the new production source is,
Okay.
when we finish profiling our existing production capacity, we're giving up production capacity. This is merely replacing it, so there's no net gain.
Okay.
It's a net break even, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
All right.
Unfortunately, the location and proximity of all the wells we're talking about, interzonal blending, and I'll never get that permitted in a million years, I wish.
Yeah, so let me back up one more step too. So when we're talking about, the well, we have a well budgeted for this coming year, and which we just purchased the property for that. What Sean is semi-proposing with this one, I think is a good way to put it, is instead of taking the money that we were going to use to fix well 14 and fix well 12 and
Drill a new well.
consider drilling another well.
Yeah.
We're a lot of the way there. We don't have another well scheduled until 2029 and 2030. This would fall under the chromium project. It would extend it about 6 months. So we're trying to find the right
Sure.
balance between throwing money towards something that may or may not be used, or actually putting it towards a second well at the same time, if we can afford it and if the board would consider that.
And thank you for bringing up the associated risk, because I've had experience where you drill one well and 600 feet away you drill another one. One meets water quality, one doesn't, and they're the same depth. in the same part of the basin 600 feet apart. So there is this always associated risk with wells, and even they test good at the beginning as they're being developed and you start to use them, they can change in water quality too.
And thank you for bringing up the risk associated with water quality changing. I'm looking at merely water quantity.
Yeah.
And we don't have to go too far. I know another water district that drilled adjacent to the aqueduct in 395 and it yielded about 5 gallons a minute.
Yeah.
There is always a risk associated.
Sure.
With that risk in mind, we look at option 2. We can mitigate that risk. Option 2 takes kind of a look at that. So the Meadowbrook Dairy has 4 existing wells. 3 of those existing wells have a sanitary seal. One well that does about 650 gallons a minute does not. I don't propose that in this option because over drilling that well and equipping with a sanitary seal has risks associated with that, collapsing the well, and due to its age, I would not utilize that in the beginning. But there is 4 existing that could be used down there. From the existing well 15 pipeline that the district installed, it's roughly 5.8 miles. That 5.8 miles at 5,280 feet per mile is about 30,600 feet, plus or minus. And this was written just before the 20% tariffs took hold, so this figure may have changed slightly. The market rate when I wrote this about 2 weeks ago was $52 per linear foot, and again, this may have changed yesterday. For 12-inch ductile iron pipe, which puts the cost just to purchase the pipe at roughly $1.6 million. An additional $78,000 for 15 isolation valves and fire hydrants. We have had conversations with wholesalers, distributors, and suppliers. There is the potential for economy and scale on this quantity that we could reduce that price by about 5% if the pipe was purchased and delivered. So staff laid about 5,500 foot in about 16 days, putting us around 350 to 400 feet of pipe installed per day. This would be a transmission line. I would expect it to go a little more quickly, less dog legs, very straight run, roads are nice and wide. I hypothesize between 400 to 500 foot per day because the fewer valves, fewer hydrants. That puts the estimation at about 60 plus or minus working days. There's very little utilities in the way. We do have a Kinder Morgan line we would have to traverse, so there would be a lot of hand digging in around that. Rental for the excavator and loader would put us around $160,000 for rental equipment. There is a 300-foot elevation change from the point of entry, which would be the existing 12-inch pipeline, and the property where these wells are located would put the total dynamic head at about 150 psi at ground level. We could design and build the wells with that pressure in mind to where it would negate having to require a booster facility down there. This area is the most desirable in terms of production because of the known quantity and quality. We have test pumped several of the wells down there, producing 1,350 gallons per minute at well 22 and 300 gallons a minute from well 23 respectively. We do have the water quality reports, but this was 10 years ago. And in my professional opinion, things can change. As we've already pointed out, it would be in our due diligence, if this were an option the board favored, to revisit test pumping those, stressing that strata just to double check and verify the water quality today. Staff estimates the yield from these sources to produce between 1,400 and 1,700 gallons per minute. The plans do exist for this option at about a 50% complete stage. As this pipeline was explored a number of years ago, CEQA was completed for the previous blending project and could be utilized as an addendum to incorporate in this option. And I'm happy to answer, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions as we go. I know I'm throwing a ton of data out there, and huge fundamental differences, and we still have one yet to go, so I'm happy to answer any questions.
I do have a question. So if you were talking about wanting to pump the wells that are down there prior to making a decision, if it were being considered as an option in this process, at what point would you recommend pumping those wells and having the water quality tested before we get too far down the road to where we either have to make a decision to go that way or with the wells? Would that be worthwhile to do that sooner than later?
We do not have that budgeted, is the only thing.
Have you saved enough money on other projects this year to where you could work it into the existing budget?
Unfortunately, no.
Well, doesn't this loop into the chromium-6 mitigation money that we have set aside? So
That-
it all has to do with finding out a solution to Chrome-6.
That is correct,
So-
but at the direction of the board had us cease all chromium expenditures.
Yeah,
Until-
so if we were to do that, we would bring it back to the board and lay out the plan and say,
Sure.
as part of the Chromium-6 project, we feel that this would be a candidate to fall into that project. And it could be done, the board has the discretion to do that. I know Sean has looked at the length of time, if you'd have to extend the project out, the amount of time that is paid. But in looking at the big picture, we're looking at what is the best bang for the buck. And so that's why Sean is presenting these tonight, whether it be to drill one well, two wells, or to connect, or to the ion exchange. To have the committee kind of think it over and then at some point have a discussion with the entire board based on the recommendations from the committee.
And that's exactly where we go, is that what is the best investment for the district? When we look at it from a cost per gallon,
Right.
and I believe
And you got to factor in the risks too of what could happen
We're
with
gonna
wells
get-
and groundwater quality.
we're going to get there on page 20.
Right. I do have a question though with
Yes,
the
sir.
pipeline work. On that, so you said roughly it's got an elevation change of 300 feet, 2.31 for every foot, so it's pressure class, 150 or whatever. What's the planned pressure class for the ductile on the lower end if it's only going to be a transmission main?
I believe it would, that technical spec is, if it's not in here, it was,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
I believe it's on page 20.
Okay, thank you.
And that is what, 250 or 250 pressure?
Three, yeah,
It's
350.
350,
Oh, 350,
okay.
pressure class 350, okay.
Good question.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm thinking outside the box a little bit. That's my operations coming out. But we have the dairy wells, depending on what we put this in at, if we ever develop future water down below the dairy, then you'll have even more head that you have to push up against. So that's where I'm thinking with that, asking the pressure class. Thank you.
Yeah, so just to follow up on that, do you happen to know off the top of your head the elevation difference between the well at George's Field and the well, say one of the other wells, like what's the other property down there, the one north of El Mirage?
The northern property.
Yeah, how much, what elevation, there may be 50 feet?
So we didn't calculate that.
Okay,
It probably less than, because in a 5.8 mile stretch, we have an elevation change of about 300 foot. So the quick math on that, you're probably about 10 feet.
so that wouldn't be too much of an issue then?
Yeah.
Okay.
And not to jump ahead, but to jump ahead, you have the cost breakdown here for the option number 2. Does this cost breakdown include the booster station that you were talking about?
The need for a booster station was eliminated. If we build the head into the wells, we can negate requiring a booster station. So its introduction point would be the well 15 pipeline that already exists.
Okay.
And there's already a turnout for it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And not to complicate things further, but option number 3 would be anion exchange treatment. So staff explored the cheapest ion exchange treatment available. It is a regeneration on wheels. So basically, it minimizes the capital cost. And we see that on page 18. what is that capital cost to equip the district with ion exchange, treating wells 12 and 14? There's some sulfates that are found in our water, naturally occurring much below the MCL, but that does not help us when it comes to bed loading or how often the resin has to basically be cleaned or wash itself, so to speak. So without sulfate optimization, we're looking at a $1.25 million estimate capital just to basically build everything that houses the resin. If we went with sulfate optimization or resin enhancement that helps sulfates, we can extend those bed volumes, but there's a little more capital cost, and that comes in at about a $1.5 million capital expenditure. This option, unfortunately, carries some O&M costs. And if you look at 4 lines above the bottom one, how much would that look like per year? That's roughly $1 million per year
For O&M?
for O&M.
Ooh, proprietary.
Yes. So this option was least favored by staff because it's so expensive, right? We target 6 part per billion, which is even getting into the threshold of my comfort level. You can push treatment to 80% of the MCL. My professional recommendation, I'm not comfortable there. I'm happy to treat to 60% of the MCL. 80% does not leave much wiggle room. And that is where these costs are derived. It's really those sulfates that require more regenerations, unfortunately. If we were to look at a traditional treatment plant, we're talking millions of dollars to construct, so that capital expenditure is even more or less unfavorable. If we look at page 19, that cost breakdown. So option 1 to drill the new wells. We do have the breakdown, the $138,000 to run an 8-inch main line to service the wells would be about $138,000. Outfitting the well is between $300,000 and $500,000. The drilling is 1.1, SCADA another 50, property acquisition. So our total estimate is $1.6 to $1.8 million. Again, this item was budgeted this coming fiscal at $2 million. So we do have a little bit of, I don't want to say wiggle room, but in case any pop-ups. The cost benefit when broken down is it's $2,583 per gallon estimate of added production capacity. The annual O&M is consistent with all of our other wells. It's about $225 pumping cost per acre foot. The option 2 pipeline breakdown, just to buy the pipe, is about $1.7 million. The outfitting of each well would be between $300,000 and $500,000. An additional $160,000 to rent the excavators, dozers, and loaders of the size that would be required. Brings our total estimate to $2.1 to $2.3 million to get that pipeline down there. That cost benefit is about $1,586 per gallon of production capacity added, and again, those O&M costs are going to be right around $225 an acre foot. And finally, our third option for the ion exchange, we have between a $1.2 and $1.5 million capital expenditure, and then the annual O&M is somewhere between. And why is the range so massive on this? Because you can simply shut the plant off. You know, obviously those wells would be the last ones we would run. So we would hope we can bring down that regeneration cost, but that is somewhere between $23,000 and $1 million.
Is that $1 million because of the disposal of the brine?
Both. So the roll-up regeneration does bring your brine, regenerate, and they haul it off.
Yeah.
Then there's a caveat to that. So if you start to see your radiologicals creeping up, and depending on the level of your radiologicals, your brine's treated as hazardous or non.
Oh, yeah.
This is assuming non-hazardous brine removal.
Right.
If you move into that hazardous class, it goes up.
Do we have radionuclides in our system?
Down where these wells are located, luckily, no.
Okay.
And it's about $23,000 per roll-up regen. So staff's recommendation is to proceed with the drilling of 2 new production wells. I did put feelers out. I contacted, if we remember, I brought to the board the request for proposals for budgetary estimates. There is some economy and scale if the district were to drill 2 wells simultaneously.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean the
Mobilization.
district even has to outfit the second well, but at least the casing would exist. There's about a $50,000 mobilization and demobilization savings to the district. So a net savings of about $50,000 that would probably be quickly eaten up by the tariffs that are in place today on purchasing the steel casing. But there is some cost savings available should the district elect to drill 2 wells simultaneously instead of 1. It carries some associated costs that the district's not ready to incur, so we would keep our asset, we would just blind flange it. This allows us the discontinuation of use at well number 14 due to that $1,190 replacement water costs, and offset the sacrifice that would be done by profiling wells 10 and 12. We do have a memorandum I prepared on page 20. Again, we kind of look at the cost breakdown, and we prepared this in hopes to bring before the board for guidance on, because the 3 options before us are so fundamentally different, and the expenditures are fundamentally different, that this lays it out for the board's consideration. And there is a 4th one that is even wilder that we didn't even put in here, but it would be connecting to the R-cubed pipeline, and that's about 12 million miles of pipe, plus your water costs and pumping costs. That's off the charts expensive, that's why it's not in here. These are the real feasible options that sometimes Don has to rein me in because I can get out there on some. But these are the 3 that are real considerations today.
Yeah. So if the staff were to ask for a recommendation based on what we've looked at today, my recommendation, what I would love to see, if the board or if the committee would like to look at that, would be have eliminate option number 3. It's just not practical. A lot of technical data that it just doesn't pencil out. But to narrow it down to like 1 and 1A, which would be we drill the well that we have budgeted right now, and then 1A is consideration of the non-improvements to well 14 and well 12, and show how that pencils out. So 1 well and 2 wells. And the other option would be the dairy, looking at the dairy option, knowing that we're going to have to do some testing before we would look at that.
And I would like to piggyback off Don's comments just really quick. The board has had Operation halt all chromium expenditures to date. The chromium surcharge, I believe, is set to sunset in 2028. That could still be possible under, as Don mentioned, 1 and 1A. Should the district elect to use the chromium expenditure, it could potentially push that sunset date back 5 or 6 months. So it's about that $1.1 million to plunk a hole in the ground. We have 600 of it already, so we're a little over halfway. So on page 20, we did prepare that memorandum just kind of as a framework, and we're happy to alter it in any which way. But staff is seeking the recommendation of the engineering committee to take it to the board for consideration. And if it would be the desire of the committee and the general manager, we're happy to exclude option 3. As Don mentioned, it's a very technical option. Then we even get into a staffing, because now we're not just water operators, we're going to have dedicated treatment personnel, and those costs were not factored. That's just, we looked at a bare bones, is it feasible? No, it's not. The cost benefit is just not there for the district. But we wanted to do our due diligence and explore that option.
You have any comments?
More of a budget question, just to make sure that I have this all lined up. So we have $2 million budgeted for 1 well currently for
Correct.
fiscal year 25,
Correct.
26. Then we have 600,000, that's from Chromium 6 funds that we have collected at this time.
So we would reallocate that
Right.
600 if it was the desire of the board from profiling those two particular wells and channel that into the drilling of a secondary well.
Okay, and is that separate from the 450,000 that we were talking about that we had?
That is the 450 plus the fixing of well 12. So that's
So
where
the 450 plus is where you got the 600?
The 450
Okay.
for well 14 and the
Yeah.
150 for well 12.
Got it, okay. That's what I wanted to make sure that I had those numbers right. Okay. Go ahead.
My turn?
Yep.
Awesome. No, good presentation. Technically, all the scenarios make sense to me in the order that they're put in. But we're going to expend a lot of money on this idea. And I'd really like to see a technical memorandum that's been reviewed by a professional engineer with their stamp on it. And this way, it shows that we have very capable staff of analyzing operations, but then it has the review of somebody from the engineer status on that. So this way we can say, hey, well, the plan we put together is great, or no, you might want to think about these other things with your options, and this way it's been reviewed by a professional engineer.
Yeah, and I think that's a good idea. What I would suggest along with that would be to present the ideas, and then when an idea is chosen or a path is preferred, then we run that through
Right.
the engineer.
Because you guys done all the technical work, you've got all the data. Basically, they would do a technical memorandum or a quasi-feasibility study on your proposal.
That would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah.
Just trust and verify.
Yeah, no,
Exactly.
we want to make sure that we're
'Cause, I
accurate
mean,
with what we're proposing.
It's the people's money, and so we want to make sure we're doing the right thing. And projects that I've been involved with always had engineer review when it comes to things like this.
That would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, as we're looking at, our rates and everything for the next 5 years, I think one of the biggest things that we have is our capital. Just looking at what the requirements we have from the state to meet the standards. And so we want to do the best that we can do, not only for, the next couple of years, but looking 5, 10, 50 years down the road, or 20 years down the road at least, for a water supply. If we can, either of these options should get us well into the future for water production and meeting our needs.
Yeah, and then the other question I had with regards to any type of pipeline work that's done. So how does our plans get designed and developed for pipeline installation?
George, you want to take that one?
Several years back, before they rescinded the MCL, we did have a contract with Ardura for design to bring in a blending project from those wells. So we put a stop on that at 50%. Those plans are sitting there at 50%, so perfect. We've already have plan and profile design. We would just then continue that with an alternative alignment to tie into the well 15.
Yeah.
So
Good. As long as there's plans for stationing, and then he'll need staking to make sure he's at the right grade. Because as the town develops, whether you want it to or not, it could potentially happen. So we want to know where all of our infrastructure is, and it's documented if they ever decide to sewer, storm drain, or put different infrastructure in. And
The great thing about the staff that we have is, George, how many miles of pipeline have you designed? More technical than even what this is in your career.
in the past, yes.
I've
hundreds.
probably done 50 miles, and George's probably has me beat by 2 or 3
Hundreds,
times.
yeah, hundreds, Big Bear, Victorville.
Yeah.
Hesperia.
No, that's good.
That's the good thing about
Yeah.
the staff that we have. We've already got a lot of it done, and it's not that complicated to go
No.
from here.
So CEQA, if I could just add, CEQA was performed and on that project. So, everything is sitting there. We need to be finalized. Plan profiles. I mean, we can continue on and complete those if we need to, and bring in survey to complete that new alignment tie-in. Shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, thank you. And no further questions.
I'm sorry, one other thing really quick, and I know you touched on it, but it was a lot. So we know that this is all being required by the state of California. but all the constituents are going to see is the amount that comes out of their bill, for the Chromium 6. Repeat what you said about the sunset date on that and whether or not that will affect their bill or not.
Currently, the chromium surcharge, I believe, sunsets in 2028, if I'm not mistaken. That is utilizing the framework that's already in place, the monies that have been collected and future collected up to the 2028 date. Options 1 and 2 would not impact that.
Excellent.
With a caveat. If the board were inclined to go option 1 and 1A, drilling that secondary, staff had recommended utilizing the 600 that is already budgeted. If we were to utilize the chromium expenditure, it could potentially push that sunset date back 5 to 6 months.
Okay.
So it
Yeah.
could potentially fall still within, and we don't have our accountants with us, it could still potentially fall within 2028, because I don't know what month in 2028 that surcharge, our accountants could better answer that question, what month it's set to sunset.
Okay.
I just know the year.
Right.
If the board were inclined to go that route, that extra $600,000 could potentially be about 6 months or so.
Okay.
So if it's, Sean had this package ready to go to the board and it was going to go next week. If the desire of the committee would be to look at the first two options, I don't think it'd be that much to modify to kind of condense it a little bit. Could we still have it in time to where Amy's not working Friday night till midnight to get the board packages out?
Yeah.
And, okay, if that's the recommendation of the committee, that's the direction we could take it.
And being on the other end of the sword, I would make sure you give yourself enough time to bring it forward without having to do a rush.
Yeah.
Just give yourself
If we can do it, great. If not, we'll have to push it back, but
Yeah,
I
I'm
think
good
he's
with
got
that.
he's got the foundation already
Okay.
laid for it.
And if we can just add in when the Chromium 6 actually sunsets, the month and everything, so that way if we do have to do 5 or 6 months, we'll know.
Yeah, that would be
It'll
part of
give
the
us,
part of the
it'll give-
presentation.
Right, it'll give the board all that information when we're looking at the two options.
Yeah, okay.
Don, correct me if I'm wrong, the funding's got to come from somewhere. It's going to come from
Right.
the money that we collect on the chromium mitigation, or it's going to have to come out of the general operating fund as a capital, right?
Yes, absolutely. And
So-
this is 100% Chromium 6 related.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. With that, I'm gonna step out.
And that, very well said. We're hypothesizing that one well would yield enough water. There is always the risk associated with the drilling.
Right.
I don't know that I can repeat myself enough times
No.
on that one.
No.
So, Dawn's correct, I do have the framework with the requests of adding in by month. I don't know that, because I'll have to have this prepared by tomorrow, I don't know if we're gonna be able to get all that together. And the feedback I'm receiving today is even more helpful. It might be helpful if we bring our 10-year CIP as an attachment to this. And as well as, if you remember back, I believe 3 or 4 months ago, we had brought in an update to the district chromium status. Maybe that would be helpful as another attachment. So we'll make sure we incorporate all that.
Yeah. Again, I would say give yourself ample time to get everything prepared and vetted.
So it more than likely will not be at next week's meeting, given
Okay.
the new parameters. So it'll more than likely be that first meeting in April.
Okay,
That's fine.
Thank you.
Thank
all
you.
right. All right, so that was the discussion for hexavalent chromium mitigation, and so we'll go.
Hello.
Sorry, we have Cheryl Roden on the line
Oh.
as well, so I think she has some feedback.
Perfect.
Hi. Thanks. I don't know how to turn my camera on here. Just a couple questions. And first, excellent staff memo and excellent staff report. I agree with the staff recommendations. Question 1, are there any rumbles out there that there might be any more lawsuits against the state on the CR6 level?
Thank you for the kind words, Cheryl. There is not. With
No, pity.
the last MCL was rescinded on the grounds of costs and associated treatment that the districts were facing were not properly vetted Unfortunately, this time, going through the Office of Environmental Hazards and Assessment, and as well as California State Water Resource Control Board, through their MCL adoption process, this was extremely and thoroughly well vetted this time. There is no talk nor action against repealing or holding of the MCL. There is, however, Senate Bill 486 that is trying to hold the mandate the district's facing on the zero emission electric vehicles, but unfortunately not on water.
Yeah. Okay. And is the elevated sulfites that were part of option 3, does that go away completely by getting rid of option 3?
That's correct. They're naturally occurring.
Yeah, and did I hear right that water loss from profiling the other wells, which I still think is brilliant, is the equivalent of 1 or 1.5 wells? Did I hear that right?
Yes, more or less. And again, thank you for the kind words. But yeah, the net loss, because you're not able to pump at capacity, and again, I liken it to the pen. We just utilize the upper portions of the well. It can't yield the same amount of water, but we get better quality. So it's about the net loss of a well. That's correct.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're prepared to answer this question today, but maybe for future consideration, is there a reason to perhaps check water quality out at Meadowbrook before we keep that in our minds for a reserve
So
and update those water quality tests?
we did touch on that. I 100% would, my professional recommendation would be to test pump those wells long before a piece of pipe was ever purchased. Water quality can and does change, and it's been about 10 years since that water quality was last pumped and checked. 100% would be my recommendation. If that option were under consideration, would be to test pump those wells.
Okay, that's it. Thanks very much. Great report.
Thank you again for the kind words.
Any more public comment, Amy? No? All right. We'll go back to item number 4, to review of the district's vehicle replacement plan.
Thank you, Director Snyder. At our last engineering committee meeting, it was asked that we bring before the committee the district's vehicle, oh boy. The district's vehicle and replacement plan. And we have that on pages 5, 6, and 7. So page 5 is an overview of every vehicle, past or present, the district owns, its year, make, model, serial, VIN, truck, or equipment number, its name in slang, license plate, the GVWR, and how much we paid for it. That's carried on to page 6. And the actual replacement plan with some color is found on page 7. This kind of breaks down the projections operation used by fiscal year, and you can see that in the years prior, those are got the strike through. This is used for budgetary. How, when, where, and why do we replace our vehicles and equipment? You notice there's really no strike throughs on equipment, because equipment has really awesome lifespans and we make it last. We try and take care of it. Vehicles, we found right at that 11th year, there's a huge spike in our district from the 11th to the 12th year. That's why we go out 10 years on the vehicles, is that's where we saw that just really elevated increase to maintenance costs. So happy to answer any questions.
No, I'm good. I didn't have any additional questions. Thank you.
You'll notice, I mean, we tried to be extremely prudent and fiscally very conservative. It's not like we're trying to load the budget, 5 pieces of equipment in any year. In fact, I mean, when you look at our projections out for equipment, there's only 3 here in the coming year. And I apologize, my eyes are killing me. So if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions.
No, I do not. Thank you for providing that information. All right, the next item would be number 6, OS Day Recharge Study Project.
Sure. Mojave, I spoke with the Director of Water Resources at Mojave last week. There's nothing very new to report. They still do plan on moving forward. I believe they're trying to mitigate the impact a Joshua Tree mandate is having on them as well at the moment. So they are still planning on moving forward. He did ask that the district participate and show their support of the project, which staff will be intends on doing in the coming meetings.
Yeah, if I can add, staff is still seeking grant funding for this project. I believe in the next couple of weeks they're heading up to DC to meet with the representatives. But there are a couple of federal funds that were earmarked for this project with the Brewer Rec and through the Water Smart grant. And I believe they think that awarding would be announced sometime in spring of 2025. That will kind of add to the project. So I want to make an assumption we're speaking of the recharge basin. Okay, great. I walked out of that for a little bit. And of course, all this is just the testing of the recharge basin until it's proven that it's a viable project. Then there will be a permanent turnout at the location from the aqueduct. And just the turnout itself, it's about a $6 million project just for the turnout. So it's a pretty penny. So funding is one of their top priorities to go after.
When you say a turnout, does that means they'll make additions to the aqueduct system? They'll put in traveling screen, they'll put in measuring device, everything for right off the aqueduct? That's
correct. There is a permanent, back when the aqueduct was constructed, there is a permanent turnout at Johnson.
Okay.
But that location was tested and it wasn't a good project.
It wasn't feasible for...
And that was done a few years back before they tested this location. And that turned out to be a pretty good
Where's
site.
the current testing done or proposed area that's going to be for recharge?
It's
It's on Cayucos,
Cayucos.
west of Oasis Road,
West OA, okay, perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
just south of our well fields for wells 10, 11, and 12.
Okay. You have any questions?
Good, thank you.
I don't have any more. Okay. Number 7, discussion regarding water systems.
All right. So everybody has probably heard of PFAS at some point or another lately. Happy to report the district did test every production source. We are completely negative across the board of any and all PFAS and PFOS.
PFOS.
However, the EPA has a mandate that every district has to sample 4 quarters by 2027. We actually just concluded quarter 2 for that testing today. So we're a little ahead of the curve, but we figured we'd get it out of the way. The state and the EPA's guidance is not exactly clear, but that is an EPA mandate. So once again, completely void. There's 0 PFAS, there's 0 PFOS in Phelan Piñon Hills.
Sean, the PFOS, PFO, that's still on the unregulated monitoring.
No, PFAS and PFOS have had formal MCLs adopted, and there's 6 for PFAS, 2 PFOS that have had formal MCLs adopted, and those range from 2 part per trillion to 6 part per trillion, respectively, and I don't know per line.
Yeah,
I
that's
just
fine.
remember the ranges. We produced 13% more water than we did in 2024. Our loss rate is right in and around 11.5%. Depending on what month when we calculate the numbers, again, we used to be at 15.9, so we're hovering right around that 11 to 12 marker right now. Huge reduction in thanks to a lot of the work operations has done and the new meters. We're happy to report well 14 production stands at 0. We anticipate it to stay right there, much like we did last year. We're almost done with the electrical upgrades to wells 1B and 2A. Speaking of well 15, that did account for 43.5% of the water produced by the district last month. That's really fundamentally changed operations in the district, and it's encouraging to hear we're looking at even bolstering that. Adding efficiency is always a great thing for our system. We're almost done with the tank washouts for the year. What that is we have a contract. We bring in a contractor, drain the tank. They take a heated pressure washer, clean it all out. So everything's spick and span. Our service line replacements, these guys have been doing an amazing job. We do have 10 replaced calendar year to date. We target 150 replaced for that fiscal year. We're already at 149. These guys are phenomenal at what they do, and we're really seeing that reduction in leaks. We're in the midst of repairing and rehabbing the last 2 boosters there. Booster B at 4B and Booster C at 5B have gone in for their respective maintenance. We've begun installing some insertion meters. We've put in 6. Those are, our booster stations are non-metered on the effluent or the discharge. We're making them metered, again, trying to hone in and tighten up that water loss wherever possible and be as efficient as we can be. We just finished going through certifying every production meter, as well as our interties with our neighbors, certifying that those are 100% accurate, as well as our booster and well efficiency testing, because we're at a place now we can target electrical efficiencies with our overhauls that we do every year. So we target the least efficient ones. We also concluded our dead end flushing. So anywhere there's a dead end in the system, every single one's been done for this year. Yeah, we're right at that 11% water loss for the calendar year 2024. Happy to answer any questions.
Rebecca?
Thank you.
I don't have any questions. Thank you. Next item would be state regulations update.
Other than the SB 4, I believe it's 468, the district did submit a letter of their recommendation. What SB 468 does is walk back some of the ZEV mandates on public agencies, giving us more time to be in compliance. And other than that, no real updates on state regulations.
All right. Next item is review of current projects.
As we mentioned, well number 18 is currently in CEQA. We are trying to get through CEQA process fast as possible, so that is shovel ready, as well as well number 16. Again, CEQA is complete there, and tank 6A. George, you want to take that one?
Yeah, we have met with our HUD grant facilitators. So we have begun the process of working with HUD. We had a meeting a few weeks ago. Our consultants kind of working with the district and kind of working through that. It seems to be more of a pleasant relationship with HUD than we did with past grant offers like federal, FEMA, Cal OES. So we're moving forward with that. We haven't really moved forward with the design yet. We're still working through the NEPA with that project with Tom Dotson and Associates. I'm going to just touch back on well 18. Tom Dotson, the engineer for that project for the CEQA, they've begun the noise assessment and the air quality on that. So they're moving forward with their subconsultant. So we're in the beginning stages of the environmental on that. Really have nothing more to add to that.
All right, thank you. And then staff reports, any staff reports?
I have none.
I don't have anything else.
All right. And then review of action items. Any prior meeting action items?
We just had the vehicle replacement plan and stuff that we had requested, so we just went over that in this meeting, and that was all we had.
Okay, perfect. And current, anybody have any current, do you have anything for the current meeting? I don't.
It'll be bringing the options before the board with the recommended changes and additions.
And then, do you want to remove item number 4 for the following meeting, since we don't need to go over the vehicle plan anymore?
Yeah, we can remove that. I thought that it would automatically be done. No. Being that we discussed it. We can remove the vehicle.
Yes.
Yes. All right. And then with that, we'll set the agenda for the next meeting for April 16th, 2025. Okay? And with that, we'll adjourn the meeting at 5:56 PM.